everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is all about the books that I read in the month of January. The dog's being crazy. If you're new here, welcome. My name's Hannah and I post all about lifestyle and basically anything that I want to videotape. I do a lot of cooking videos, cleaning videos, and travel videos. And I'm really into reading, so I'm going to be doing a monthly recap of what I read in the previous month. So my reading goal for this year is 70 books. Last year I read around 53 or 54, so I think that it's achievable. So if you're not already, please consider subscribing to my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And let's get into the video. In the month of January 2023, I read 6 books out of my goal of 70 books. Take my ratings with a grain of salt because I normally give books a like high rating. I'm trying to work on redefining my ratings. To me, a 5-star book is like, I would absolutely read this again. I recommend it. It's like one of the books that I recommend to everybody. You know, I own a copy of it, or because usually I give away my books if they're not my favorite books. Sorry, my dogs are playing. You'll see them running around. So yeah, that's my 5-star rating. And then a 4-star rating is a book that, I wouldn't necessarily read again, but I did enjoy reading it. And I do still recommend it to people. A 3-star book is a book that I appreciate. Was it a waste of time reading? Most likely, but I normally won't recommend it, and I definitely won't ever read it again. And then I really don't give books 1 stars. I usually do 2 stars is the lowest I'll go. It's like, this book was awful, and I don't appreciate it because it was a waste of time. That's like my rating scale. A 5 is an absolutely must. You must read this. I would read it again. I have it in my collection. I always recommend it, kind of thing. A 4-star rating is like, I recommend it. You should read it. I enjoyed reading it, but I don't think I'll read it again. A 3-star rating is like, I appreciated it, I enjoyed it, but I don't recommend it, or I wouldn't read it again. 2 is I absolutely hated this book, waste of time. A 1 is I don't know, I feel like I don't finish 1-star rating books because that would be a waste of time. So most of my books I give a 4 or 5 stars because I don't read bad books. So I kind of want to start with the very first book that I read. Now, some of these I did start last year, as you'll see later on. They're pretty big books, but I finished them this year, so I'm counting it as that. So the very first book that I finished was The American Roommate Experiment, and this is what it looks like. The American Roommate Experiment. So I already read The Spanish Love Deception, which is also by Elena Armas, and it's actually the first book, so I recommend reading that book before you read this one. This is kind of like a sequel to the first one. It has characters in the first one that are in this one. So I really loved this book. It was a fun kind of romance. So this book was kind of like a fake boyfriend turning into a real lover kind of book. So this is the main character of this book. Her name is Rosie, and she's actually the best friend to the character from the main character of The Spanish Love Deception. And it's about her and this boy, Lucas, which I don't want to give too much away because I don't want to ruin it for you if you want to read it. And it's just a romance novel. It's set in New York City. Basically, this book is about Rosie, who quits her 9-to-5 well-paid job. She was very high up in her job, and she ends up becoming a secret writer. And she's lacking inspiration, so she needs something to inspire her to write her next novel. And that's where Lucas comes in. They kind of form this fake boyfriend bond, and yeah, you know where it goes from there. I gave this book a 4-star rating. I think it's good. I'm not necessarily going to read it again, mainly because I wasn't intrigued by the book. I didn't want to pick it back up again because I really liked it. It was more I wanted to finish the book, and I'm a completist when it comes to series and stuff, so I really just wanted to finish the whole series. And I gave Spanish Love Deception the same type of rating. It didn't just I just wasn't all there for it. It kind of felt like it dragged on, and it was still really good, and I do recommend reading it if you're into it. But for me, I don't think I'll ever read it again. This is the second book that I read. Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. And this book, oh my god, 5 stars. I loved this book so much. I actually got it in my book of the month for, I want to say the month of December or one of those months. And I really, really loved this book. I call this like a STEMinist kind of book where it's about it's kind of set in, I want to say the 50s, and it's about a woman named Elizabeth, oh no, it's the 60s. And it's about a chemist, and her name's Elizabeth Zott, and it's her navigating being a chemist and being like one of the only female chemists. I don't want to give too much away, but she ends up like making her own show, and it's like a cooking show, and she incorporates chemistry into it, and it's very like female empowering. And I apologize for the dogs. I just really, really loved this book, and I do recommend it, and I gave it a 5 stars because I would read it again. I really loved it. There are some trigger warnings in this book. I don't necessarily want to say what, but if that bothers you, then maybe read up about it before you read it. I really, really thought this book was so good. I was really intrigued by it. I couldn't put it down, and I highly recommend this book. Next book that I read, I don't have the physical copy of it because I sent it back to my friend who gave it to me. But it's All Good People Here by Ashley Flowers. I'll insert like a picture here or on the next slide. If you didn't know, Ashley Flowers is the creator of one of the like #1 podcasts in the world or in the US, the Crime Junkie podcast. So this is her very first book that she has come out with. And it's kind of set in a small town, so it's like a murder mystery, a cold case. It kind of goes back and forth between present day and back into like the early 90s or late 90s. The main character's name is Margot, and she is a journalist. So when she was like around 6 years old, one of her friends got murdered in her small town that she was a part of. So ever since then, they've been trying to find the killer, and she's also been trying to find it. And then so she comes back to the small town because there's another murder in another town closer to their present day, so in like 2019 or 2020, and she's trying to solve that, and it's a really good book. Honestly, I think I would rate it probably a 4 out of 5 stars. I don't necessarily want to read it again, but I do recommend it. I think it was a really good book. There were some parts where it's like slow, and I'm like, is this necessary? But also this is the author's first book, so I only imagine that it's gonna get better. And if she comes out with something else, I will read it, especially if she comes out with a sequel to this book. Then I definitely will read it. Again, I don't like to give things away, but there are some twists in this book that you will or will not see coming. Some of them I definitely saw coming, and some of them I didn't see coming. And by the time you get through this whole book, you will literally think every single character is the killer. Like, every character that comes up in the book, I'm like, oh, they're suspicious, they're suspicious. I have been waiting to finish this book for almost a year now. I finally finished Hamilton. So this is the book. And I actually audiobooked this book because there is no way I can get through this without it being on like 1.5 speed. I really love the Hamilton musical, and this is the book that inspired the musical. So I really just wanted to dabble more into nonfiction. This is honestly maybe the first nonfiction book that I've read in a very, very long time. Oh my god, this book was 36 hours to get through. So I started this on February 23rd of 2022, and I just finished it this month. Well, I guess last month. I am really not a nonfiction girl. I love my fiction books, especially my romance and my thrillers and my mysteries, that kind of stuff. So I am not a good judge when it comes to rating nonfiction books. This book was really good because it went into a lot of detail of Alexander Hamilton and his life that the musical doesn't necessarily go into, obviously because there's not enough time. I call the musical my guilty pleasure because I literally listen to it all the time. I really just wanted to know more about Alexander Hamilton. He did so much more than what the musical shows, and it does talk about all the other characters. I am finally happy that it is off my currently reading on Libby. Like, that feels so weird that this book isn't on there because it's been on there for almost a year. As far as like rating it, maybe I'll give it a 3.5 to 4. I don't think I will ever read this again because it took me basically a year to get through it. I think it's unfair for me to be rating it because Like the audiobook was even dry itself. Like it's just kind of dry. Like, but if you're into history and learning more about, you know, our founding fathers and about Alexander Hamilton, then I do recommend listening to it or reading it. Let's see how many pages this is. So this book is 731 pages. Oh my god. And I really would only listen to this on like car rides or long trips. So, or like if I'm bored, I'll throw it on. So that's why it took me a really long time to get through it. But I'm really happy I did, because it was kind of a goal of mine to read a nonfiction and especially to read the Hamilton book. On to the 5th book. This is the 5th book that I read last month, Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk, I think. And this was our January book club book. So if you didn't know, I am part of a book club. My best friend created her own book club. It's called Serendipity Book Club. She's actually here on YouTube, so go check out her channel. She just posted her very first video of her January read, so she reads a lot more than me, so go check her out if you're interested. I'll leave a link below to her channel. A lot of you may know or have heard about this book. It's a fairly old book, and they have a movie out about it. Honestly, this book is kind of all over the place. And it's like kind of from their point of view, where they don't really tell you who they are, that kind of thing. It's kind of just their own thoughts and their point of view. The author kind of leaves his corporate job and goes and creates his own what's called Fight Club. So basically it's a club where you come, you fight each other, and then you go home, go back to your normal lives. And there is a really good twist at the end. So I'm gonna give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Will I read it again? No, probably not. Was it still a good book? Yes, I do think it's a good book. It's a smaller book, so we got through it pretty quickly. I think it was good. So that was the 5th book that I read this year. And lastly, oh my god, save the best for last. So the last book that I read in January was A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. So I actually read A Court of Thorns and Roses in December, and I am thoroughly obsessed. I'm already hooked on this series. If you haven't read it, it is amazing. Like one of the best series that I've read. It keeps you intrigued and it's suspenseful, that kind of stuff. And this is the 2nd book in the series. I honestly think this book was better than the first one, and the first one was really, really good. So I gave this book 5 stars. I am currently reading the 3rd book. The 2nd book is all about Feyre, who is the main character in the 1st book, A Court of Thorns and Roses. She went into the immortal world of the High Fae, or the fairies, and this is a fantasy book. And I'm not huge into fantasy, but this is chef's kiss, so good. If you kind of want to dabble your feet into fantasy, I highly recommend this. So it kind of picks up where the first one left off. This is more centered around her adjusting to her new life, that kind of stuff, without giving too much away. It's just so good. I don't know, I'm like upset with myself that I waited this long to read it. So that is it for all of the books that I read this month. So my favorite reads, I have to say, would have to be A Court of Mist and Fury. That one was my favorite. Second favorite was definitely Lessons in Chemistry. I really, really loved this book. Oh, I just hit myself in the head. So I do want to post more book content because I think a lot of you guys do enjoy that. You will see a monthly what I read this month book overview. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And leave a comment below of the books that you've read this year or books that you recommend. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!